Greetings, my name is Tedla Melaku, and I am a writer and human rights activist with an academic background in philosophy and social science. I am here to convey a short message to all humanitarians and human rights activists about the Amhara genocide in Ethiopia. Please listen attentively and be a voice for Amharas who are being ethnically cleansed by using the hashtag Amhara genocide. Just last week, there were disturbing reports of Amharas massacred in Oromia, half of whom were children. International journalists and media are as usual silent on the matter. The ethnic terrorist organization known as the OLF has been perpetually targeting and massacring Semitic-speaking ethnic Amharas in the Oromia and Benshangul regions ever since the current Ethiopian government has welcomed it into the country with its arms. And it is believed that some government officials in the Oromia region are themselves collaborators in these perpetual massacres, and international media outlets are simply not reporting on the Amhara genocide. The victims of the Maikadra massacre, for example, 1,000 unarmed civilians who were massacred and buried in mass graves, were confirmed ethnic Amharas killed by Tigrayan Samra TPLF. The genocidal attacks in Metekel, Benshangul, and Oromia, where thousands of children, their mothers, and poor farmers were helplessly massacred, mainly targeted ethnic Amharas. And this is still ongoing. But world media outlets and journals are only focusing on one region and wrongly accusing the very victims of genocide Amharas of ethnic cleansing. It is deeply sad that Tigrayan civilians have been attacked during or after the war that TPLF itself instigated. But blaming Amharas, the very victims of a state-sponsored ethnic war that intends to cleanse them out of several regions and has done so for decades, for the deeds of other parties is a disastrous failure of justice on the part of neutral organizations and media outlets. The current post-war situation in Ethiopia was a ticking time bomb. The TPLF really believed they were going to win this and had intended to capture the capital, Addis Ababa, by way of war. Their spokesperson had openly said it, hence the reason that they instigated the war themselves, hoping to first annihilate the Amhara forces. The genocide of Amharas has now been ongoing for decades and intensified over the past 3 years. The number of Amharas displaced and ethnically cleansed or genocided in the past several decades is frankly incalculable. Professor Aslat Waldayis understood from the very beginning and made great efforts while he was ridiculed and rejected by hypocrite and selfish elites who had inflated egos and little conscience. Throughout the years, neither international media nor Ethiopian elite cared to show even a tenth of the same emotions they expressed for the sad deaths of a handful of people in terrorist incidents, for example, in Paris or London, when Amharas were being hunted and massacred outside of their so-called region in Ethiopia. Instead, they preached that Amharas should not resist because it's tribalism. Yes, they were arguing that a now casually stateless people experiencing genocide should not assemble, seek a voice for their plight, or protect themselves and fight for their own lives. Why? In order to avoid becoming tribal. It is to stoop low, they explain. This moral treason is now costing the lives of Amhara people and other Ethiopians in the very country that their forefathers built. The discriminatory and selective outrage of liberal media outlets vis-à-vis genocidal crimes in Ethiopia is only adding fuel to the fire. Mostly liberal Western journalists and academics have been actively painting a false image about the situation by accusing Amharas who are victims of genocide as culprits who massacred civilians. This intentional, selective, and outright perfidious activism has had a multiplying effect and reached prominent global politicians, including members of the British Parliament in the UK and leaders of the Democratic Party in the US. This has caused international institutes to misconstrue the reality on the ground and to communicate to the international community that those who suffered massacres, displacements, and ethnic cleansing are themselves the perpetrators who committed these crimes. The Amharas have been being genocided and ethnically cleansed for decades, but Western media and politicians chose to be entirely indifferent and neglectful about the situation. The number of Amharas genocided and displaced in the past 3 years alone is incalculable. But not a word have we heard about the Amhara genocide from liberal journals accusing Amharas of the disastrous outcomes of the war between Abiy Ahmed's Oromo government and Tigrayan People's Liberation Front, or TPLF. The perpetual genocide of Amharas in Oromia, Benshangul, and areas such as Welkite, formerly forcibly occupied by the TPLF, was seemingly not worth the humanitarian concern of these journalists, and politicians. But as soon as the inevitable war instigated by TPLF itself breaks out and Amharas, having defended themselves and successfully resisted, recover their former lands, it is then that these extremely biased and partisan Western leftist leaders rear their ugly heads to cry foul. This bigotry and total favoritism ought to be articulately explained to international institutions that have any level of integrity. Thank you for listening and for being a voice for the Amhara people.